Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of our 2021 virtual conference. I am Rachel Alton, the online community manager, and I'm here with the Gypsy Nurse CEO, Steve Curtin. Hello, Steve.
Hello again, Rachel. Day 3 of our virtual conference, and we are moving right along. We've had some great sessions, and thank you for putting them together. We've had some great guests, and I think we've had some great information for our community.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is the most we've seen each other in a whole week. We talk every day, but we don't get to see each other every day. So it's fun to talk to you. It's fun to see all these comments come in. I see a lot of you are in here every single day, which I'm super excited to see some familiar names every session, giving all of our presenters support. And you guys are all just amazing. I know, Steve, you have a few things that you wanted to say and talk to the nurses about.
I do. Thank you, Rachel. Well, as CEO of the Gypsy Nurse, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I want to thank our travel nurse community for all that you do, particularly during this COVID pandemic. The Gypsy Nurse's mission is to support travel nurses, and we hope you find this session and the others we have planned later this week to be informative and helpful in your travel nursing journey. Please remember to visit the gypsynurse.com's spring virtual conference agenda under the events tab on our website for a full list of all of our virtual events this week. Please bookmark the gypsynurse.com as your source for travel nursing resources, including over 150,000 jobs from over 65 top agencies, travel nurse housing options, and great content from experts that we publish daily to help you on your travel nursing journey. As a reminder, these sessions will be recorded and available on demand on our website after each session, and they can be found on our 2021 virtual events conference page. So if you miss anything or you want to pass something along to a friend, please refer them to this page. Please remember that the Gypsy Nurse is the #1 destination for travel nurses, and we thank you all for your continuing support. I would also like to thank Jill, Wendy, and Brittany from Travel Nurse Across America for joining us today to talk about choosing and changing nursing specialties for career advancement. So Rachel, back over to you.
Yeah, definitely. And we have some giveaways too. I know that everyone's excited for all these sessions, but we also have tons and tons of giveaways going on. Our first one that I'm going to tell you about is if you join or register on the gypsynurse.com over here, you can be entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card. So it's super easy. You just fill those out. It takes just a couple seconds to fill out. And then like Steve was saying, you can come down to our events tab over here, and you can click on our Spring 21 virtual conference. And like he was saying, you can come down here. These are our previous speakers, so you can just click on any of these, watch them on demand. You can see the upcoming, upcoming sessions as well. And then if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you can find this registration form. So once you fill that out, you'll be entered to win the same Amazon gift card. So you get double entry for doing both of those. So you'll definitely want to do that. And then also for today's session, if you comment, ask questions, interact, share the post on Facebook or anywhere like YouTube, share it with your friends, you'll be entered to win a different $100 Amazon gift card. So just interact in those comments and you'll be entered to win. So
and just to clarify, Rachel, you and I are exempt from this, right? We're like friends and family. We cannot be considered for any of these prizes, right? So we're not competition, right?
No, definitely not. And the only gift that we're getting is all these wonderful presenters coming on and all these nurses getting all this great information, which we did before the conference. We did take a survey to find out what you guys wanted. And the #1 interest was nursing specialties. You wanted to learn so much about nursing specialties. So I dug deep and I found the best person I knew, and she grabbed the best people she knew. So combined, they have over 67 years of experiences as nurses and work 25 different specialties. So they definitely know a few things.
Amazing.
They come from all different kinds of backgrounds, but they love, love, love helping travel nurses. So I would like to welcome Jill, Brittany, and Wendy. Thank you, guys. Hi.
Hey, guys.
Hi.
Well, thank you so much. There's a huge interest in learning this. I see it every single day in the Travel Nurse Network group. Everyone always asking. So thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to explain specialties to everybody.
For sure. Thanks for the awesome introduction, Rachel. We appreciate it very, very much. Maybe we can just take the time to go in and talk about our individual experiences, the city that we live in, briefly and quickly, and then we can kick off and get started with the many, many topics that we wanted to discuss. So I'll go first. I am local here in Denver, Colorado. Britt and Wendy know that, but many of you don't know that out there. Worked for many HCA hospital systems in the Denver metro area. Started out in critical care, ended up in a float pool. So literally have worked in so many different units, which is such a great, great thing if you're looking to be a travel nurse or if you just really want to extend out your experiences. So I would literally worked in the ER and the ICU, and then I worked med surg, and then I went to tele, and then I'd float to PCU, and then I would also float to postpartum and some of the many other units of the hospital. Literally kind of had to work everywhere sometimes as helping hands, but that gave me great eye-opening opportunities and visions into the PACU, one area where I've never worked. So anyways, that was one of the best things I can say about going backwards in my time as an RN is working in many different areas to get the many different pieces of experience. So Brittany, how about you? Tell us about your experiences next.
So I started out in the PICU. I did that for about 5 years before I started traveling, and then went all over the country doing PICU and NICU jobs. So University of Mexico, Arkansas Children's of Orange County, Seattle Children's, Boston Children's of Colorado, and then I helped open the NICU in the Colorado Springs campus. And then I came back to Dallas-Fort Worth, where I am local, and I'm working PICU at a children's hospital local here. And I had a brief period of time where I went perm staff in Colorado and worked pediatric critical care float pool. So I did pediatric cardiac ICU, neonatal ICU, and PICU. So I've done a little bit of everything. I also had my chemo cert at one point, so I was doing induction chemo in the pediatric ICU. So peds is my thing, and love it.
Peds is her thing. Peds isn't always everyone's thing, but we're so thankful for those who do. So that's awesome, Brittany. Wendy.
Well, I've had worked for about 35 years, and I'm currently in Wilmington, North Carolina, but I started out in Canada. I got my education there and then came quickly across the border to California to work at Children's Hospital LA. Started my career as a pediatric nurse, went to the pediatric OR, then just kind of stayed in the OR for a long time, worked as a transplant coordinator, then kind of back and forth between the cardiac Cv OR, and then I bumped over to the ER, which was a big transition. Took me a lot of convincing to try to get into the ER, but then I worked there for a long time, kind of back to the OR. And then I started traveling. Well, I was a lead nurse at a college, also in a clinic for 5 years, which was pretty interesting. And then I started traveling, and I traveled mostly in the ER and the pediatric ER. I did both and traveled for 2 years before I started this position. So
awesome.
I love different things.
Yeah, so we've got a wide variety of folks who have been all over the country, which is fantastic. So we can't wait to get some of your questions out there from all of you gypsies to hear what it is that you're wanting to learn about the specialties. But we know some of the top things that nurses want to know. So we kind of wanted to start out just talking about the new nurse, the nurses who are in nursing school. What do you want to do? What should you do if you want to be a travel nurse? Everyone has a different mindset when they're in nursing school. What do you want to be? What do you want to do? And you go through all these different modules and all through these different education pieces, and you're like, ooh, that was kind of interesting, but no, that one's not for me. So you really want to think about those things that interest you, maybe regardless of what it is that you want to do. I know from a personal perspective, I went through the labor and delivery portion of nursing school, and I knew that was not for me. But others may know that it really is for them. And so you always have to listen to your heart, and you know you want to be a nurse anyway, and you know you want to care for the patients, but what is it that you want to do with your career? So let's kick off with this conversation just as it relates to new grads and anyone who's in nursing school who may want to travel. And so I'll share a couple of my experiences, and then I want to go around to Britt and Wendy as well. But being in this industry for over 10 years, and then prior to that still working in the hospitals, I see ICU nurses who are constantly in need. There's always a high need for a critical care ICU nurse. Throughout the pandemic, that's what we've experienced, and through the 2008 and 2009 downward turn in healthcare and kind of the crash in the industry, if you will, ICU nurses still had a high need and a high calling in the industry. So the three of us talk often in our workflows as well, and we feel like it's just any top of practice specialty gives you a wide variety to work. So if I'm an ICU nurse, if there's not an ICU position for me, I could step down to PCU, and I could work in a PCU position if necessary, and I could even keep going on down that ladder if I needed to. So it gives you a wide variety of going downward in some of the specialties, if you will, to just really expand your opportunities. So there's many other practice instances we could give, but I think the critical care specialties are just key if you're wanting to do travel nursing. So Brittany, Wendy, give your thoughts on your piece of that and where you really think a newer nurse could expand their wings if they're wanting to travel.
Well, I mean, like you said, Jill, I think working in the highest acuity specialty for that specialty is important because, you know, like for me, I love pediatrics. So PICU, I have the most autonomy. So I can really work in any pediatric specialty for the most part without, you know, a big issue because I'm working at the top level of my specialty and it's easy to step down. So, you know, I think finding a specialty that you love is really important, but, you know, getting those skills right out of school and going into that specialty that gives you the most autonomy, gives you the most opportunity to grow is super important.
Good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you know, when I graduated from nursing school, I wanted to go right into the OR. That's all I wanted to do. And I was told to go work on a med-surg floor for a year to get your, you know, to get your nursing skills down, your organization, being able to interact with other, you know, the doctors and the allied staff and everybody else. And it was really good advice. I'm glad I did that. And I did, because they said, if you go straight to the OR, you'll never go back, you know, and I agree with that because it's hard, you know, once you are in the OR to move. But then after that, I did go to the OR, and after a while, I did switch to the ER after many years, and it was really hard. It was a big transition. You know, I had to really convince them to let me do it, and it was like orienting a new grad because I hadn't given a med in so many years. So that was, you know, that was interesting, but it could be done, and I did it, and it was a great transition. And now I feel like, you know, I got the best of both worlds because then I had some good skills from the OR, like my sterile technique and all that stuff and catheters, all that stuff. I had that stuff down in advance and it helped me. But I agree though, having critical care, having that ER background is awesome. You know, having that critical care, critical thinking background, you know, seeing a bunch of different things from all of that makes you, that's really good for traveling. And then something else we didn't mention is traveling, you know, for the new nurses, you need to have a year of experience in a hospital, in a short-term acute care to be able to travel, you know, and so that's really important, you know, get that one full year in a hospital of experience, and that'll give you a lot more flexibility as you travel also.
Mm-hmm.
Glad you brought that up, Wendy. Two huge things I heard you say. And the first one is something that I too heard when I was in nursing school is you've got to get that med-surg base. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean you have to, but would I exchange that for anything? No. I actually learned a lot. When you have to task for between 5, 7, and 8 patients at a time, it helps you with prioritization, which is really important. It helps you with your organizational skills, which is really important. And then it just helps you learn to collaborate with your physicians, to collaborate with other healthcare providers on the unit that you all work so closely together with, your case managers, your physical therapists, your speech therapists, your unit secretaries, and most importantly, your patient and the patient family members. It's a huge collaborating piece, and that can be really hard to miss when you're a new nurse and your focus is just passing the medications, making sure you get the right medication, making sure you get the right dose, making sure you have the right patient. I mean, the list goes on, and the stresses can be so big, right? So getting that information and that experience on the med-surg unit for at least 12 months is just important, but not necessary. If you know that you want to be a pediatric nurse and that is what you're going to do, then by golly, go to the pediatric med-surg unit and work there for an entire year. And then if you want to escalate up to PICU like Britt Garcia, then you escalate up to the PICU and get that experience, because wow, she's done some really neat things. I mean, doing induction chemo on a pediatric patient is something that just can really be fascinating to one person and really, really scary to someone else. So it really just depends on what it is that you want to do. I'm also glad, Wendy, that you mentioned 1 year. I think the 1 year of med-surg is important, but then what does your specialty, where does it bring you after? You've got to have a solid year in whatever specialty in which you choose to travel. If you choose to travel, that's a Joint Commission requirement. The Joint Commission, for those of you who may not know, is a government agency. They govern how the requirements that we must have to put our nurses in specific hospitals across the country. So that's really cool. We're getting some comments, so let's look at a few of these. Nikki Kelly, pre-op, PACU, started med-surg, moved to PCU, stepped down first. Fantastic. So here's another perfect example of a nurse who started med-surg. I'm sure, Nikki, you would agree with the rest of us. You kind of learn those skills. You learn to organize. You learn to really put things together, and then you moved to a higher level PCU, step down, and then into the PACU. Fantastic. So look at your realm of experience, and the places that that experience can take you is excellent. Your road in nursing is excellent, an excellent example. So thanks for commenting. We want to hear more from you. Don't forget what Rachel said at the beginning of the call. They're giving away prizes and gift cards. So come on and ask your questions. I think something that we can get into, though, as we're waiting for more questions, is to let's just, I'm going to jump a little bit and talk about the different ICUs. Since we started talking about critical care, there's a lot of different ICUs, and there's a lot of ICUs that differ from hospital to hospital across the country. So if you're a critical care nurse and you're an intensive care unit nurse, you might work in one pocket of the United States and you want to go to a specific state, and all of a sudden they're calling their ICU a CCU, or maybe they have a MICU, maybe they have a SICU. What does all that mean, and what do all these different ICUs mean, and how do they differ? So I would love to kind of share some of that with you guys, and for sure, definitely, thank you, Nikki, for commenting. We 100% agree with you on here. But let's talk about the different ICUs. And Wendy, I thought you had some great comments previously on previous calls that we have had, but you know, what's the difference between a CV ICU and between a CCU? Do you want to tackle those two cardiac units for us?
Yeah, so CVICU, they're going to be taking the fresh post-op open heart bypass patients. So they got to be able to recover a patient. And that's the main difference between CVICU and CCU. And sometimes we get, you know, ICU nurses that have experience in CCU and they want to take a CVICU assignment, and that's just not a good mix because they just don't have the experience needed for that assignment. And so that's what we do too, is we kind of look out for that and make sure we put the right nurse in the right position so that they are successful, because we want them to be successful.
Yeah, there's a good and there's a reason for agencies, especially like you know, our agency at TNAA or any agency in the travel industry. We want to make sure that you're going to an assignment where you're going to be successful. And so when we talk to you about what your experiences are and how things were at your specific hospital, we want you to be very aware that that just might not be the same at another facility. So if you were working in a CV ICU at a specific hospital and you recovered the open hearts and you have the experience with the swans, then we we can pretty much place you in those types of settings across the country. But if you come from a CCU, you haven't recovered that fresh open heart. You haven't worked with a lot of those critical pieces with a fresh open heart patient. We don't want you to be in a situation where that's thrown at you. That would be horrible for you as an RN. It's bad for the facility. It's most importantly, it's not good for the patient. So there's a reason that we want to put you in an amazing placement so that you're successful, and then you can build on skills as you're in travel assignments. And we want to get to that a little bit too in our conversations with everyone. So we're getting more comments. Hannah commented, I've been a med-surg nurse for 4 years. I've learned so many things. It has helped so much with prioritization and time management. Agree with you 100%. Thank you so much, Hannah, for commenting. Nikki said, I've assisted in recovering open hearts in the Cv Icu. It's very tedious work and requires fast, critical thinking skills. Nikki, the one thing I heard you say that is just so true is fast. Fast-paced, critical thinking skills. You have to be on your toes at all times. And that's just really important, and you have to be used to that environment. You can't just jump into an environment like that fresh and new. It's going to be really, really difficult. So always get those skills as a new nurse. Get that as a permanent nurse in a hospital. You're going to really get the training that you need so that you've got that skill set to then travel and jump in. And this common thing that we say in this industry, hit the ground running. Right. Sometimes you get very little orientation, and you've really got to be able to prioritize on that unit fast, because that's going to be my favorite word of this whole entire thing. So thank you for that, Nikki. But you have to be fast, and you have to really work fast. And especially throughout today's pandemic, the ratios are different. ICU nurses are no longer 1-to-1. Every once in a while, they'd be 1-to-2. Well, now our ICU nurses are 1-to-3 and 1-to-4. And so you talk about really having to prioritize and organize. It's a different world out there with our ratios right now. And pre-pandemic, we all thought the ratios were a little rough, and we were really looking for federal guidance to get us better nursing to patient ratios. And the pandemic really hasn't assisted with that at all. We've got higher than normal ratios, and it's really, really difficult to manage. Nicole Dunn just commented. She is a PACU nurse. I started on a med-surg transplant ward. That's a hard place to start. That is hardcore. I worked med-surg for 5 years and must agree having this solid background really helped when I moved to PACU. So perfect example, Nicole, of another nurse who started med-surg, and you worked your way up to that critical care aspect, which is perfect because now you've got a lot of room to go downward into the specialties if you had to take a different type of assignments. Per se. So that's great. Thanks for commenting, everyone, so far. Other ICUs to compare. I mentioned the MICU and the SICU. So the medical ICU and the surgical ICU. Some of the bigger hospital systems have anywhere between 5 and 9 ICU units, and that's the huge hospital systems, but they will separate the ICU units out. So that's another good thing to know in the travel nursing industry is how do you decipher all the different ICU units and what ICU unit is best considering where I came from. So if you come from a hospital where you took care of medical ICU patients and surgical ICU patients, you've probably got the skill set to go work in either or if you're going into a hospital that has multiple ICU units. What else would you guys add about the ICU, Britt or Wendy, before we move on to another topic?
So you know how Wendy had mentioned that you need at least a year in your specialty before you can travel. I would kind of piggyback on that and say, where you're comfortable. So where you feel like you can function and rely on your skill set and your training is probably my best recommendation before you go out into the travel world, because you're going to get 1 to maybe 3 shifts of training with another nurse. So, like Jill said, it's fast. You get like 0 orientation, and then they just expect you to hit the ground running and take care of these patients. So, I don't want new nurses to think, oh, now that I got this year, I can just go do this. Some, yes, can, but you have to be very confident in your skill set before you do that. And that's different for everybody depending on, your training and where you're working initially. So that's just something to keep in mind too.
And it's also, back to the ICUs, it's really important during the interview. If you've got if you're very specialized in the ICU, like let's say you're CCU, or let's say you're surgical trauma, like ST, that's important to ask in your interview. What's going to be expected of you? Are you going to be floating between the different ICUs, or where are you going to primarily be assigned? And that's going to help decide whether that's a good assignment for you also, because they can be very different. And in, like Jill said, in the bigger hospitals, you could be in a neuro ICU and you could only see neuro patients. Well, this assignment might want you to go to cardiac ICU or medical, and that might be really different for you, or the opposite. A lot of people don't feel comfortable doing neuro. They've never had any neuro experience, and then they want you to cover a neuro ICU and you don't know neuro. So is like to feel comfortable enough to travel to that, because they, like Britt said, they expect you to be an expert. When you show up, you're expected to know your specialty and hit the ground running.
Well said. Any neuro ICU nurses out there right now? Because wow, I mean, you are amazing. That is a hard unit to work on. Glad you brought that up, Wendy. Sorry, Britt, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. And like back to the ICU being in so demand, like especially now with the pandemic, these patients are so sick that these hospitals are wanting to utilize these ICU nurses because, let's face it, you're the expert. They can put you anywhere in the hospital essentially and get the patient care done. So they really want to find these nurses, which is why it's such a great specialty to be in, whether it's adults or peds.
Yeah, well said. And one thing I really heard you guys say, and I just think it's super important, and this is how we help nurses be so successful at TNAA. We recommend that whatever environment they just came from, that should be the environment they go to for their first assignment, because it's just important that you're comfortable in that realm, because when you travel, you're going to a different city. You've got to learn so many things, and it can just be a little bit uncomfortable. If you at least know your workflow is going to be similar to what you just came from, do that for yourself for your very first assignment. Partner with your recruiter. Make sure your recruiter understands the environment you came from so that he or she can put you in that exact same environment when you're going out to travel. We have a couple more comments from Gail. Great information as a mother-baby nurse. Oh, Gail, you have one of the best jobs ever. I floated to mother-baby, and those were the best days and the best shifts of my nursing career. Not that there weren't scary ones, because sometimes those little babies decide to turn blue, right? So let's not take that away from you. That can be incredibly scary, but I have seen expectations to also have L&D for floating. If you're not interested in L&D and have antepartum experience, how does this work for L&D opportunities? So if I'm reading you correct, Gail, you've got the postpartum experience, you've got some antepartum experience. How does it work for L&D opportunities? Honestly, L&D is so specialized, and a lot of travel agencies require more years of experience in labor and delivery because it is such a high-risk specialty. So my recommendation, and what we recommend to any nurse who wants that labor and delivery experience, is really your best opportunities to be full-time, to apply for a full-time position on that labor and delivery unit. And I would suggest at least 3 years of labor and delivery experience because of its high risk nature. And you're probably going to hear that from more than one person in this industry. You've got a laboring mother who's your patient, and you've also got a baby who's your patient. So it's double whammy in L&D. It's a fantastic specialty to get your expertise in. It's such a neat place to work, but I would recommend 3 solid years, and that's what most of the hospitals will recommend and want to see for any travel nurse who's got labor and delivery experience. So great that you asked that. We wanted to talk about women's and children's a little bit, and that's another one that we can just touch on quick while we wait for a few more comments. Labor and delivery is kind of off by itself, but then you've got, let's say, a well baby nursery, postpartum nurse, and some of these hospitals, again, they're set up differently. So you might have a well baby nursery and your postpartum nurses kind of doing both at the same time. And then you've got other hospitals where it's like, no, you're full-time well baby nursery, and then you're full-time time postpartum. Any experiences you have, Britt? You've been to so many women's and children's hospitals. What's your recommendations for just that whole entire women and children's section?
Well, it kind of depends on the facility. Like you said, one of my NICU contracts in California, they expected me to go to the high-risk deliveries to assist in the babies because, that's my deal right there was the kids. So even though I don't have labor and delivery experience or any of that, I'm strictly there for the baby. So that is part of the expectation as a traveler. If you're working in a facility that has those units and your specialty is NICU, you do have to go there. Or I even floated to the postpartum unit and I took care of the babies, helped moms breastfeed, that kind of thing.
Perfect. That's good. Women's and children's is just a neat place to work. It's always been just something of interest to me just as a nurse. So let's switch over, since we're really specialty driven in this conversation. I think one of the things I want to touch on, which will get us into so much more specialties and conversations, is if you're a current traveler and you want to move specialties, you want to move over one way or another to some different specialty, how do you do that as a travel nurse? And it's really kind of difficult. But we wanted to share with everyone some of the success stories we have in doing this with some travelers who were successfully moved and trained in different specialties and able to then start traveling in that specialty. So I want to touch on a few, and we'll all kind of get back and forth to this, and some of this will go back to Britt being a PICU nurse. But throughout the pandemic, we were able to do some different, what's the word I want? Outside of the norm placements that we normally do pre-pandemic. And a lot of it was, if you had PACU experience, you could go to a COVID ICU. If you had some ER experience with a little bit of vent, you could go to a COVID ICU. And kind of the list goes on and on. I don't want to go there too much because a lot of that is over, if you will. We're back to really putting straight ICU into ICU. But we've had some success stories with PICU nurses becoming regular adult ICU nurses, or vice versa. ICU wants to go peds, they'll go to PICU and start taking care of the pediatric patients. So Britt, maybe you can share the why behind this and why that transition can be a little bit quote unquote simpler. There is no simple transition when you're switching specialties and you've got a lot of training to do, but how it can be done and how you can get it done in the travel industry.
So a lot of people don't realize that PICU nurses actually deal with anywhere from newborn up to young adults. So, there is a lot of times where we deal with these adult patients. Obviously it's not as frequently as if you're working in an adult ICU, but so there is the ability, if you're taking care of those patients on a more frequent basis, to transition either from adults down to peds or peds up to adults. You just have to be able to show that work experience. And, in the pediatric world, everything is weight-based dosing. So, that's kind of the big transition from coming from adult ICU to kids. And then if you're going from kids to adults, it's all standardized. So
good feedback. So we've had some successful stories of our PICU nurses just going straight into adult ICU nursing. And we have to obviously partner with the hospital system to have that happen. And so what we share with any traveler who works for Travel Nurse across America is we need you to get with your manager and your director, build that relationship, get that rapport, and when you kind of the stars have to align, if you will, and they really have to align well. The hospital might have a big need, like all of a sudden their adult ICU just really needs adult ICU nurses, and maybe that particular PICU nurse has done her time in peds and really just wants to transition to adults. So we can make that happen on our end with the facility, and you can make that happen as well, kind of simultaneously, so we're all working together to get you the training that you need in your travel assignment. So we've had nurses train in their particular travel assignment, then start a new travel assignment at the facility in their new specialty. And as Britt alluded to, take, I don't know if all agencies do this, but I know that our agency has blank referencing forms. You've always got to have a fresh reference from your current travel assignment so that your profile looks great. Even if you don't have to have one, I would get one so that you stand out in the travel world with a very fresh reference on your profile that goes to any manager's desk or any director's desk in the hospital, and tell them about your new training and what it is that you've done. But you've got to show chunks of training in the travel industry. You can't just train for 2 weeks and all of a sudden you are a new specialty nurse. You've really got to have a solid, if you've got a great base as an ICU nurse or as a PICU nurse, you've got to have a solid 6 months on that new specialty on your resume in order to start traveling in that new specialty. And we've got some other success stories, but let's jump to some comments. Marie says, I was a postpartum RN for 4 years, but it was at the beginning of my career 26 years ago. I've done med-surg and PACU since then, but travel companies won't let you do postpartum unless your experience is within the last year. And I know with some review, I can do it. It's frustrating. I hear you, Marie. I hear you loud and clear. A lot of us are, again, I kind of mentioned it early on in our conversations, the Joint Commission, which is a government agency, really makes sure that we're placing nurses in these hospitals with current experience. And it's also the hospital as well. So as much as I hear you that you did the postpartum a long time ago, it is in your best interest to get 6 months of fresh experience so that you can jump into travel and you'll have no questions asked on that resume moving forward. Going to mom baby to PACU is Gail's question. Definitely gonna have to have that critical care base in there. That's a tough jump, Gail, and I think it's a great opportunity. But on mother baby, if you think about some of those critical skill sets, you don't have the ventilator, you don't have the patient extubating, and just a lot of those things that happen in the PACU. You're really going to have to be a full-time employee to get that kind of jump from mother baby up to PACU critical care before you take a travel assignment. In the travel nature, if you think about those experiences that are very close, a med-surg nurse going to tele, we can assist with that at times. A tele nurse going to PCU, we can assist with that at times. The ICU to PICU and the PICU to ICU that we shared, interchangeable, because as Britt alluded to, she takes care of 25-year-old patients who weigh 180 pounds. So she can transfer over to the adult in the ICU fairly simpler than someone who's not got that critical care experience. So those are all good questions. I would want to be a PACU nurse too, Gail. I still want to be a mother baby nurse. Honestly, it's still just the most fun I ever had as a nurse. Yeah. Another question, quick from Steve. Let's go through more questions and then we'll make more comments. As the COVID pandemic begins to subside, hopefully, I hear you, hopefully, over the next few months, what do you all see relative to most in-demand specialties? It seems like elective surgeries will increase. Woohoo! That's a great segue into a conversation that we could have quickly. So kind of as we've all talked about, the ICU nurses are still in a high demand, but is that going to shift and is that going to change? So I think I'll just share something that a local surgeon said to me, and some of what our hospital systems are sharing with us is that the ORs have only put back about 40%, or they've only chunked away about 40% of the elective surgeries that were halted throughout the pandemic. So it sounds like in most pockets of the United States, there's over 60% of all of those electives still waiting to be scheduled. And so what we're seeing at Travel Nurse Across America, and I'm sure other agencies are seeing this as well, is an increased need for OR nurses again. The OR nurses kind of ride the wave. They definitely rode the wave through this pandemic. They were the ones who all got canceled early on as all of the ORs canceled their electives, and then they came back in high need as they started to open back up. But we're thinking, and the experts are saying in this industry, that they should really see an uptick. So your OR nurses are going to be in high need. And what we're even starting to see, you guys, that is really, really different is night shift OR positions. Usually you just have your day shift OR nurses who take call. Now we're starting to see night shift OR because these hospitals are booking surgeries all day long and all night long. And this feeds, obviously, into your PACU. I think we're going to see a much higher need for our PACU nurses. Some of these surgeries that are same day will go home, while others will help fill up the hospital census. So you're going to see your ICU units remain full. And then, of course, it feeds on down the line into the PCUs, the teles, and the med-surg units. So what would y'all add? Wendy, you're a previous OR nurse. What do you think about the whole night shift thing?
Yeah, that's something that OR nurses are not used to for sure. They like that Monday to Friday, 7 to 3, with a little bit of call. But so yeah, that's a big transition, and that's a good thing to discuss in your interview again, for sure, to understand what your needs are. I mean, and the other thing about night shift too, that a lot of ORs, nurses, and some of the, haven't understand is you're going to take more of a charge role if you're working the night shift, because they're probably going to run only 1 or 2 rooms. So you might be kind of taking charge and working in the room. So you need to ask those kind of questions and be prepared for that.
Be ready.
You might be a traveler and in charge. So just be ready for that. But yeah.
So Britt, as they're talking about that, when you think about pediatrics, we used to have these huge RSV seasons. We used to have these huge flu seasons, and that's been a little bit different in the past 12 months. What is your previous hospital shared their thoughts on, or RSV season? What anyone seems to think about that right now?
So we still haven't really seen any flu. I know that we're starting to see some bronchiolitis, which is really late in the season for us. But still nothing like the respiratory season that we normally see. So I'm interested to see how this winter is for peds, because I honestly have no idea. I mean, granted, now that Texas is people aren't wearing masks as much and things like that, it will be interesting to see, like, if maybe we get like a summer surge of something like respiratory for the kiddos. Because normally for us, it's like the traumas, kids are out of school, they're getting hurt, or they're having those surgeries that they didn't have during the school year that could wait, that kind of a thing. So I'm honestly not sure what's going to happen with that.
You know what? I think that's a fair answer. Pediatrics is a tough one to gauge right now. And the science and the experts, which I always try to follow the evidence-based practices, right? I think most of us as nurses are saying that a lot of the immune systems just have been weaker because everyone has been staying home, social distancing, masking. And there's some of the experts that are saying they think RSV in some of these seasons could potentially be bigger than they've ever been before. But nobody knows. Nobody holds the crystal ball. We kind of have to wait and see what's going to happen to all of those pediatric PICU, NICU type of positions. So let's see. Go ahead.
I was going to say, interestingly enough, I did read an article that said that during the pandemic, they had a decrease in the amount of premature births. So the NICU saw like a slight drop in that. And I don't know if it was because women were, out doing things like normal, before the pandemic. Everyone was locked down at their house, so babies weren't being born as premature, but for whatever reason, that happened, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Very interesting. That's awesome. I think I alluded to everything surrounding how to get experience in other departments, just really sharing that you want to do that slow move. So if you're that med-surg nurse who really wants the cardiac experience, we didn't touch on education at all yet, and I was hoping we could get to that. But one thing you can always do to help yourself is to get those certifications. We love to talk about those. We've got a certification program at Travel Nurse Across America where we will help you get your certification. So if you're an ICU nurse and you want your CCRN, now might be a great time to load up that resume, make yourself stand out as a travel nurse, and look at some of those certifications, because that will help you in your training in whatever specialty it is you're hoping to jump into. As you're talking about the tele nurses, the PCU nurses going to step down, or IMC or PCU, we all know it's called something different in every single hospital. Use those certifications as a driving point to get your experience on those EKG strips. Go to some of the educational websites such as StatSkill. It's a fun site where you get to do tons of different EKG strips, and guess what they are? Well, don't guess, but do your best to learn them and understand them and work on those certifications. I just wanted to touch on that super fast if we don't have time to get into the education piece, but that's another great way to help yourself. It shows a manager or a director that you have the drive and you really want to get the experience in that specific specialty. So
I was going to actually touch back on Marie's question about the postpartum stuff. If you haven't done that for however many years, if you want to get back into it or at least be able to travel it, pick up a PRN position where you work 4 shifts a month and get that recent experience. And that could be your refresher if you want to get to travel in that specialty.
Mhm.
Love it. Great,
Yeah.
great advice.
Yeah,
Thanks for
and
that, Britt.
I thought too back on that about changing specialties. And sometimes it seems like, oh, I could do that, but I was an ER nurse. I was adult and pediatrics. I did both, but more adults definitely. And then I went to a pediatric ER assignment, and and it was tough, just plain peds. It was a transition, and after I got that experience, and I felt pretty comfortable going to all peds ERs. But even though I'd done peds in a peds specific ER, it was very different. They did things a lot differently than an adult ER doing peds. So so that's why it's so important to make sure that you are prepared for your travel assignment.
Yes, and as Britt and Wendy have said many times, you're considered the expert when you walk through those doors. And don't forget that technology has really changed over the years. So as we all know, the care for the patient is, of course, you're going to remember that, Marie. I mean, you've done it, you do it in your sleep, right? But the technology has changed a lot, and the technologies can really put you behind in your day-to-day on the units. And if you can't keep up as a traveler, it's hard to be successful. So that's all great feedback. A question is, can you comment on telehealth opportunities for nurses? Wow, is that a new transition post-pandemic and throughout the pandemic? And I think it's a great opportunity for nurses. Many of the telehealth opportunities can be done from your home. I happen to have a neighbor who's a nurse practitioner, and she does all of her work from her home and sees all of her patients via her phone and her camera. So we are seeing these opportunities start to pop up. In travel nursing, some of the best things that we can recommend for it is to get into the telehealth opportunities that are within a hospital system. That makes it much easier for you as a traveler. So you may go to the hospital system, and you may even go on site to the hospital to work in a particular section of the hospital and do the triage telehealth opportunities from an office type of setting. That's fantastic for any nurse to get into. Honestly, you've got to have the recent experience to do this as you would to take an assignment on a unit. So if I'm a telemetry nurse, I'm a cardiac nurse, I'm going to have to go into cardiac telehealth opportunities where I'm an expert and where I can talk to these folks via the communication opportunities that there are. And you don't want to stay away from the bedside very long as travelers, so keep that in mind. It goes back to what Marie alluded to. Travel agencies want you to have the experience within the last year. So if you're going to jump over to telehealth, you either want it to be a permanent move or you don't want to do it for more than 6 months at a time, because you've got to get back into that hands-on patient care activity. Anything else you guys would want to add to that, Wendy or Britt?
Yeah, that's the only thing that I've seen kind of recently is some questions about somebody that's been doing telehealth and then going back to a regular assignment. You don't want to stay in it too long. Agreed.
Yeah. Danielle's asking, can you share any other sources for learning, retouching skill sets, and newer tech? I think the best resources, we've got a ton of them internally, of course. Google search, immense out there opportunities. I think some of the best ones for cardiac is skill set. Wendy, what else do you have up your sleeve doing all the test prep for our travelers?
We usually just kind of have been using our resources here that we've developed in-house, and we just send them out to help, make the testing that's just more condensed so that you don't have to research the whole thing, but it's more test specific to, help you pass those dysrhythmia tests that we all have to do at all the different hospitals. So we send out stuff that we just developed from different programs. There's another one online, but I cannot recall the name. It's a really good one. It's very interactive. It's kind of like skill set, but it's, it shows the heart and what it does during the different rhythms, and it's really good. So there's lots of programs like that out there. Some of them you have to pay a little bit for, or a membership, but it seems like most of them you can shut them off too. Like you can only do a month and then just end it.
Stop them.
Yeah, but they're really good. And especially if you're planning, you're getting ready to do an assignment. I always did a lot of research too. I like to feel comfortable going in, making sure I knew what I was doing.
Because you're the expert. That's good. Britt, do you have anything to add for pediatrics at all?
Well, I mean, just in general, like being a part of a professional nursing organization is also really helpful because they do send out a lot of learning opportunities, journal articles, things like that. And a lot of them do offer free CEUs if you are a member. And I think the membership is, depending on which one you join, it can be very inexpensive, like $70 for the year or something like that. So well worth it.
Yeah,
Great advice, and there's tons of them. There's American nurses. There's pediatric opportunities. There's, oh my gosh, I mean, it goes on and on.
AORN.
ACRN, AORN, CORN. I mean, there's just a ton of them. But definitely, and Daniel, if you want to get more specific about what skill sets you're looking for, I'd be happy to follow up with you after this call and give you some more resources.
And it looks great on your resume.
Yes, it does. It does. I'm glad you brought up the professional organizations, Britt, because the more you belong to, honestly, it does. And get involved in your local and state communities as well. I'm a huge advocate for the Colorado Nursing Association. I attend monthly meetings with the Colorado Nurses Association, and just keeping in touch with what's happening in your own state is super important as well. We wanted to touch base a little bit on ambulatory. We didn't talk a whole lot about same day type of stuff. This could go back to a little bit about demand specialties and what we see happening in the future. There's huge growth opportunities in the ambulatory setting. There's not as many travel opportunities in the ambulatory setting, but for those travelers who are exhausted, who are looking for a little bit of a less acute, more of a Monday through Friday opportunity, the peri-op opportunities in these ambulatory surgery centers are amazing. So that's your pre-op nurses, your OR nurses, and your PACU nurses. And they also place techs. So your OR techs, sterile processing techs, can work in these same-day surgery centers as well. It's usually a great environment. The patients aren't as sick. They're maybe coming in to get their broken finger fixed. They walk in the door and they walk out. And it's just an amazing setting, and it's why it's called ambulatory. But that's a billion-dollar industry and continues to grow.
The other good thing is sometimes you have short days because once the surgeries are done, you can leave.
You're done.
So I know, like in our local center, they let it most Fridays. They're all out of there by early. So that's kind of a nice little benefit too.
I don't disagree. Like, what? I can be done working at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. What do I do with my time? You're like going to Starbucks? Woo! This is awesome. So that's super good to say. And then there's other disciplines that you can get into that are same day that are just kind of cool. I don't know how many of y'all, of the gypsies out there, are endoscopy nurses. Endoscopy is neat. And the things that they can go in and do, like they can go down your throat with a tiny bucket and retrieve things. And the technology is just amazing. And so I've always been fascinated with endoscopy. Another great same day opportunity that is just really neat is interventional radiology. That's a great specialty to get into if you're wanting to travel. The jobs aren't as amazing. There's not a ton. There's not 500 to choose from like there would be with an ICU nurse, but they exist, and the opportunities in interventional radiology are just neat. You get to work with the radiologist. You might go in and do the liver biopsies, just working in the radiology section of the hospital with a lot of the oncology doctors, and it's just a really neat environment to be in with those patients who come to see you. Generally have a procedure done under conscious sedation, recover, and go either right out the door and back home or back up to the unit that they came from within the hospital. So that's just another neat little discipline that nurses can get into and get the training for on the side. Any other opportunities as it comes to education? Britt, I know you talked about something, but why don't we just talk about how important the resume is quick to anyone who wants to get into travel, and talk about the importance of making yourself stand out to any director or manager on a unit, why that manager or director should know you. You don't want to be referred to as the traveler on your unit. You have a name. Get in the know with this manager and director. It's amazing to me how many times I'll talk to a traveler and they never met their manager or director.
So what? Networking, network. Traveling is a small community once you start going all over the place. Like, when you get there, you want to introduce yourself, tell them your name, to have a conversation so that later down the line when you're at that assignment or you need a reference, they know who you are and not just another traveler on their unit. And if you're wanting to get into travel and you're trying to build that resume, having those certifications, those professional organizations on your resume, because how are you going to stand out compared to all these thousands of other travelers competing for the same job? You are a piece of paper to them, and they might have 100 on their desk. And why are they going to pick yours over somebody else? You have to put those things on there to make yourself stand out. And then once you actually get the assignment and get to the facility, make those connections and keep the connection so that, if you want to go to another hospital, if you are able to, say, hey, I've worked here, and reach out to that manager there, you make that, and it really helps you kind of go wherever you really want to go, honestly. Like several of my assignments when I traveled, I had friends that had been at other hospitals that I really wanted to go to, made connections with those managers. I sent them my resume beforehand and actually got the job. I basically told my recruiter, I was like, hey, the manager wants me. Can you send my file? Like, it was awesome.
That's how you do it.
And you can use the network too of all the travelers that you meet on assignment to see which hospitals that you might want to go to too that would fit your experience best. That or some of the hospitals that you might want to travel to and might not. Yeah,
great
that's
experience.
helpful too. Yeah.
That was just great advice. I'm hearing from a lot of travelers as well that they just maybe want to take a break and they might want to further their education. Look at the many different BSN programs out there. If you don't have your BSN yet, that's always a great opportunity. They're all online. They make it very they just make them so user friendly to accomplish, even if you're working full time. There are so many opportunities in master's programs. I mean, my gosh, I saw someone ask a question about what is informatics. You can get a master's degree in informatics and kind of work with the in-house tech teams to be that clinician who aids in all the technology building that is taking place in a facility. That would be fascinating. There's administration, there's education, there's healthcare policy, there's geriatrics, there's pediatrics. The opportunities are endless to advance your career, which is, of course, just another great way to build your resume. Is it necessary? No, but it always makes your resume outstanding and look different. And the same goes for the certifications. Find an agency, if you're not with an agency yet, who maybe will reimburse you for those certifications. They aren't cheap. Some of them, if you take the training courses and everything, can be a good $400 to $500. Find an agency that will reimburse for those and work on the maybe the ONS chemo certification that you've always wanted, or work on the CORN like we mentioned, or the CCRN for the ICU. There's just a ton of them out there and tons of opportunities. And then, of course, there's NP programs if you really just want to get away from bedside hospital nursing. I just have always thought that's just the neatest thing about nursing is the opportunities are endless. And if you get tired in one entity or one discipline, you can move to another. Is it a little more difficult in the travel world? Yeah, it can be, but it can be done if you partner with your agency and your agency partners with the hospital and you partner with the hospital as well. It's a collaborative teamwork type of effort. Anything else you guys would want to add about a must-do for a traveler before our time is almost out?
Well, just when you're talking about getting your BSN online, I mean, just because you're a traveler doesn't mean that your company won't help you, support you, and pay for that. So I got my BSN while I was traveling and got reimbursed for it. So just keep that in mind when you're a traveler too. That doesn't disclude you from that.
For sure. There are a lot of agencies that have reimbursement programs. We have one here at TNAA. We will reimburse your BSN up to 100%. And then many other agencies out there will reimburse up. They've all got their own programs. So do your research and look at what it is you can find to get that assistance that you need. Thanks, Danielle, for the comment. Very useful information. We appreciate you. Michelle Sherry commented, I'm an OR nurse. We love OR nurses. Michelle, you've got a tough job. Shannon Nilsson is saying, way to go. She sent us a heart. Yay. Thank you, Shannon. Great information from everyone. So we appreciate all of you. Kathy just commented. Kathy Aponte, excellent info. Thank you so much. Absolutely. We've enjoyed our time with all of you gypsies. And Daniel, don't forget, if there's anything else you want, I can reach out to you after this and we can touch base on some resources that you may be looking for. I think we're good. Steve, Rachel, coming back in. That hour went fast.
It sure did.
Wow.
It sure did. You guys are on a roll. You guys were on a roll.
kept
Thank you
going.
so much, Jill and Brittany and Wendy. That was excellent information. As Rachel said at the beginning, that is a huge topic of discussion within our network group. As you guys well know, just the aspect of specialty options, where new nurses should try and focus in on specialties and so forth. So this is really, really helpful information. And again, if people didn't catch this live, this is going to be available on demand on our events page on our website. So I advise anybody that maybe caught the tail end or whatever, definitely go and check out this. And we really appreciate your support of travel nurses, and appreciate all you're doing for the community by doing this. I do have one question as we wrap up here, and Jill, you kind of alluded to it earlier, but as again, hopefully the pandemic is winding down a bit. We know that the last 12 or 14 months has been really, really difficult for the nursing community at large. For those that may want to, I don't want to say take a break per se, but perhaps move away from the critical care aspect and move into other options, what are some things that you guys are seeing or hearing out there, with regard to that sort of thought? Are you seeing people that are maybe looking to try and get acclimated to a different specialty for a while to kind of, get away from the burnout aspect?
Yeah, that's a good question, Steve. And we're seeing so many different things. So you've got some of your nurses who jump into ambulatory because they want the Monday through Friday position. The telehealth is a fantastic place to go. If you're maybe even looking for an opportunity where you can work from your home, that is definitely a fantastic one. Many of the same day type of nursing specialties are where some of our nurses are wanting to go to get out of the acute care hospital setting. It's been a very stressful environment for them. So anything that they can do outside of the hospital is great. You've got to kind of keep it within your specialty, but triage is another fantastic one. Nurses who can literally just triage pediatric calls from moms that are coming into doctor's offices and things like that, you can tend to do from your own home. And then of course, case management is another one that can be done from your home. What I forget, girls, but that's a lot of what we hear. And some of the nurses are just taking 3 months off, maybe 4 months off.
I was going to say, the nice thing about travel is the flexibility. If you don't want to work for an extended amount of time, hey, don't work, finish your assignment, take some time off.
Take a little time.
Something that's I think is really awesome that we offer as an agency is we have an EAP program. So, to really help support our nurses when they're dealing with that difficult stuff on assignment, because let's face it, nursing is stressful, and we pour our hearts and everything we have into our patients and these families that we care for, and we need to take care of ourselves. So I think TNAA does a wonderful job of taking care of our nurses and offering stuff like that.
Yep, important.
Excellent information and a great way to close out the session. So Jill and Brittany and Wendy from Travel Nurse Across America, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your support of the travel nursing community. Thank you for what you do. And we appreciate your sponsorship. Certainly, if anybody's interested in traveling with Travel Nurse Across America, you can find their jobs on the gypsynurse.com, or you can go directly to Travel Nurse Across America's website. And we know that Travel Nurse Across America is a great company to have a travel nurse assignment with. And when you're working with people like Jill and Brittany and Wendy, it just shows you what a quality organization it is. So again, thank you guys very much for what you do and the information you've passed along. And we're definitely going to have you back. That's for sure. You know that. You guys are regular guests with us. So we look forward to having you back again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gypsy.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Well, that was wonderful. Great start to the day.
Sure is.
Education. And then they did speak about, I just want to show everybody about continuing your education, which is very important no matter what, what role or, specialty you're in. And we actually have, if you're not with TNAA, I know they do their own, but we do have a way to continue your own education. So if you come here to the gypsynurse.com, come to resources and to continuing education, you do get a great discount through there. If you just click on there and give it a second. But yeah, we've partnered up with them so that way you can get a 20% off your CEs with Elite Learning. So some of you may already use them, but now you can get a discount. So you just come to resources and continuing education.
Absolutely. It's a great CEs and a great discount. So definitely for those that are looking for CEs, take advantage of that through the gypsynurse.com.
Yep, definitely. So that ends it for today. Thank you all for your comments and questions. Keep them coming. We want the conversations to keep going. Share them with your friends. So thank you, Steve, again for joining me as my co-host.
Absolutely. Again, it's been a great conference so far, and we're only halfway through. We have a session at 3:00 with other members of TNAA regarding a compensation discussion, I believe. And then this evening, we also have an event at 7:00 as well. And that is with one of members of our travel nurse community, I believe, to talk about it was RV travel, I believe, Rachel,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then tomorrow also, they spoke a lot about kind of leaving the bedside, going to telehealth. We actually have a nurse tomorrow talking about how she left the bedside. This past year, she had been working at the health department, and she would contact the people who contracted COVID. And so then she would make calls and say, who did you hang out with? Where did you go? And so then she would do all of that work. So she's going to talk about her experience the past year and what you can do by leaving the bedside. So all kinds of great stuff coming up.
All right. Well, that was a great session, and we look forward to our 3:00 and our 7:00 Eastern time tonight. So Rachel, I will be seeing you in just a little while.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.